Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Welcome to The Ray Taylor Show, where I bring you reviews of the latest movies and TV shows, as well as classic and foreign films. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and on this podcast, I'll be talking about all things film and television. Whether you're looking for a new show to binge or want to know if that blockbuster is worth the trip to the theater, or just want to hear my thoughts on a classic or foreign film, I've got you covered. So join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes, and let's dive into the world of film and television together. On today's episode, I am talking about, you guessed it, The Christmas Chronicles Part 2. This came out in 2020, directed by Chris Columbus, as well as written by Chris Columbus, along with Matt Lieberman. Starring, of course, Kurt Russell, Goldie Hawn, Darby Camp, Julian Dennison, and Jahzir Bruno. In this movie, Kate Pierce, now a cynical teen, is unexpectedly reunited with Santa Claus when a mysterious troublemaker threatens to cancel Christmas forever. I didn't like this movie as much as I liked the first one. This isn't a horrible movie, but it's not like a new favorite Christmas movie of mine, despite the potential this movie had. And also makes me understand why I didn't remember this movie after clearly having seen it, seeing both Christmas Chronicle movies. And the first one I remember being great, and this one I couldn't really remember what happened in it. Kind of makes sense after having seen it again. And it's kind of a bummer because this is written and directed by Chris Columbus, who wrote somebody that's had kind of an off and on career. But when he hits big. I mean, some of his movies that he wrote, Gremlins, The Goonies, he directed Home Alone, Mrs. Doubtfire, 2 Harry Potter movies. So the guy has it in him to make great movies, especially like kids' family movies. And this movie does have elements of Gremlins, which, especially considering the design of the elves in this world, look very much like Gremlins. There's very much a Gremlins style aspect to this movie. So I don't know. It's kind of a bummer. He's also made some stinkers over the years too, which I don't feel like going into. But he's also done some all-time classics. So it's kind of a bummer that he is so inconsistent. And I would say this is definitely not one of his worst movies, but definitely not a classic. Not a movie that I would recommend. Not necessarily. It's okay. I'm sure, it's this movie did well when it was released in 2020, but although I think 2020, that was during the pandemic, so I think numbers a little bit skewed. With people wanting to see the follow-up to the first movie, and then also just wanting something good in their life, something positive in their life that isn't the reality, the dumpster fire that is reality. This one doesn't have the same fun action moments necessarily that the first one did. In my opinion, I didn't like the action moments, the adventure. Kind of feels all over the place. They bring back the kids. They bring back Kate specifically from the first movie. And included her potential stepbrother in this one. So making her the older of the two and bringing back a young kid to be teamed up with her. Which I don't... that's one aspect of this movie I don't think needed to happen. I don't think we needed to. In a movie that's called The Christmas Chronicles, kind of in some ways makes me think that these are going to be different kinds of stories that are going to be involving Christmas, centered around Santa Claus, and not necessarily a direct sequel to the previous film. Although the title Part 2 kind of, I guess, would make that assumption. But so bringing her back, not a big fan of that. This also, in addition to bringing her back, this also has the part of the story is this elf that was banished from the North Pole. And then also we have the addition of Goldie Hawn, which I actually like. It was teased at the end of the first film, which kind of interesting that it was only teased at the end of the first film. And she wasn't more involved in the first film, although they didn't really spend a whole lot of time in the North Pole, but still. Definitely a lot more. This takes place primarily in the North Pole, but not all of it. So we do get a lot more of Goldie Hawn in that, which I do like that aspect of it. I love Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell teaming up again. But it really just felt like this one was all over the place. Like it was really trying to do a lot of different things when I didn't think it needed to. You could have cut out a lot of different stuff. Of course, there's a lot more of the CG elves, which makes sense. Adorable CG elves characters. This series really reminds me, and I think I brought it up in the previous review, really reminds me of the Despicable Me franchise. In that, you have the central character of Gru in the Despicable Me franchise, and he has all of these helpers, these minions that help him out to do his things. In this one, you have the central character of Santa Claus, and you have all these elves. These CG adorable characters that don't really speak English. And do all the work for him. Very similar in a lot of ways. And I think this series could have been very similar to that series in that if they had made a better part 2 and just not bringing the baggage of the first film with Kate along with it, could have been completely different. Kids could have just been this story about this elf that was banished from the North Pole, telling his story, and then the conflict between the North Pole and him, and the internal turmoil that happened in the North Pole, and not even had bothered with these kids, I think would have made it a better movie. But just turning it into more of an anthology, like each movie is a new chapter in the Chronicles of Christmas, where Santa, one of them could be the origin story, which this movie kind of taps into a little bit, which reminded me of the Santa Claus, the movie from the 80s, which also taps into the origin story of Santa Claus, which I think is, I don't understand why there isn't a Christmas movie that taps into that more, that just fleshes that whole thing out more, instead of just touching on it like the two movies do. But this movie could have done that and then had spin-off movies with just the elves, like the Despicable Me franchise did with the Minions movies. And I would have loved that. I think there could have been a lot of fun to be had using that similar format. But, not that they couldn't, I just don't think this movie worked very well. I just really thought it was trying to do too much. Seriously, I understand if they have to bring kids in to be part of the story, but for it to have to be one of the same kids from the first movie, and to involve that family again, just seems ridiculous. But yeah, would have loved this to just be another chapter, another story involving Santa and something that happened in the past. It could be a period piece of him in the 90s, which this movie does have a little time travel aspect to it. It really could have been a story about him and her father in the 90s and how that all played out. Maybe her dad was helped Santa out in a story back then. Like this could have opened it up to be so much more interesting than just kind of a direct sequel. And I do love Julian Dennison, who's the villain in this. I love him in most things that I've seen him in, but did not like him as the villain. Did not buy him as the villain at all in this. Playing the somehow human that, I mean, they explain it, but finding out that he used to be an elf and now he's a human and he's evil. Didn't buy that he was evil. Kind of confusing that he was a human, despite the fact that they explain it. They also, everybody kind of splits up doing different missions within this movie. Just a lot of stuff going on. A bit too fractured, a lot of stuff going on. While also trying to hit similar beats of the first movie, like a musical sequence involving Santa, which are great sequences, and I don't mind that being like a common aspect to the framework of these movies, but I don't know. I just think there were some, it was trying to do too much. A lot of interesting ideas, but never really came together in a way that I really enjoyed. Right? Not in the same way that the first movie did. Let's take a short break from this episode. Listeners, are you an art lover like I am, or simply somebody who appreciates unique creativity? I've got something you'll adore. Dive into the world of the many faces, an ongoing series of mesmerizing ink paintings on paper. Each piece is a captivating blend of abstract and surreal, always presenting a face that tells its own story. The dedication behind the series is unmatched, with new paintings being released daily, and if you're thinking about owning one, you're in luck. You can start with a 4x6 painting for just $20. And if you desire something grander, there are larger sizes available with prices to match. Imagine having an original piece of art infused with emotion and mystery, gracing your space. So if you're intrigued, don't wait. Check out the entire collection and get your own at inspireddisorder.com. Own a piece of creativity that'll truly stand out. Now let's get back to the show. But I do want to talk about spoilers, specifics of this movie. So from here on out, spoilers for the Christmas Chronicles Part 2. So this opens with the kind of anti-Santa in a way. We're introduced to the villain. And also it's an elf, so clearly it's going to be more of the CG elves, which makes sense. Anytime an adorable CG character is introduced in a film, you're going to see more of them. I'm sure that was one of the things that kids loved. Oh, they loved the little elves, which I did too. Same thing with the Minions, And when you find out that this villain, used to be an elf, the whole time until we find out way later the explanation for what happened, I'm thinking, so elves are just kids that just grow up into adults? So the entire North Pole is being run on child labor, which just, I was just, what is going on? His idea is to kidnap the girl, Kate, from the first movie, for reasons that barely make any sense. I mean, the only reason he needs to kidnap her is because this movie is stretching for a way to include her in another movie. But as far as him needing to kidnap her, a true believer, in order to get in, because that's the only way he would be able to get in for some reason, doesn't make any sense. I mean, in this, he just jumps and holds on to Santa's sleigh and is brought in. The fact that the girl is there doesn't make any sense why he would be able to get in there as well. Because she didn't know he was there. It's not like a situation where she had to invite him in. Somebody from inside has to invite him in. He just snuck in and could have done so much of this. It didn't, if you cut out Kate and it's just this ousted elf trying to get revenge on Santa, that's all you need. You don't need to have all this other stuff. But it is what it is, I guess. And even still, you like if you cut her out, the scene where Santa goes back in time and involves her dad, which is a sweet moment where she gets to have this moment with her dad, the realization that this kid that was helping her is her dad, was kind of a sweet moment. But that whole thing could have been Santa going back to the 90s and this kid and crash landing in an airport, and this kid at the airport knows it's the real Santa and he helps Santa out to get what he needs. And he could be the new kid that's helping, and then we find out that, oh, that was actually the dad from the first movie. Would have been fine. I also don't buy this family from the first movie that loves Christmas so much would go on a trip to Mexico for Christmas. Doesn't make any sense at all. Thankfully, the older brother wasn't part of this movie. It was just Kate, but both, I'm not a big fan of either of the actors, which is kind of a bummer. It seems like, I mean, she wasn't horrible, but it seems so unnecessary. The mom has a new boyfriend, Bob, right? He's got a young kid too, and it's played by Tyrese, who is, I don't know what kind of tranquilizers Tyrese was on, but he was, his performance in this was just painful to listen to. Glad that he wasn't a big part of this movie. The end of this movie wasn't horrible. Like, the end still kind of got me because it's an end of a Christmas movie. But the beginning where we see Tyrese speaking, it's very bad acting. Just horrible performance. Not that Tyrese is some Academy Award winning actor or anything, but I don't know. He was doing something as far, just too much. So Kate's idea was to fly back home on her own to Boston, and she gets on some random cart to take her to the airport, and his first thing is, I'm going to take a shortcut to get you to the airport. The potential stepbrother hitches a ride on this golf cart as well. And it's just like, just the whole setup for them then going through the wormhole to a random place in the North Pole, but not the actual North Pole, outside of the North Pole, is just a lot. You also, in this movie, the first time we see Santa is hunting, which not something you think of Santa doing, hunting this cat, this specific, it looks like a snow leopard, but it's not. I forget what they call it. And he just randomly sees these kids laying down, because that's how they didn't like huddle together to try and get warm. They just individually laid down in the snow to just die. But whatever. He gets the kids, and that's where the evil elf just jumps onto the thing, and there's like this North Pole defense system is crazy. Like, Santa is like this right-wing prepper in a lot of ways. First off, all of the elves do all of the work. He really doesn't do anything. Apparently he invents some things here and there, but the elves do everything. His wife and the elves, I should say, do everything. Aside from, obviously, he delivers the presents on Christmas. The North Pole has this insane defense system for what? I don't know. For like the one elf that they ousted. And their defense system doesn't allow snow to get in. So they have to artificially make it snow in the North Pole. But like, it's like so much of this is like, the world building that is going on in the North Pole is more and more depressing in this movie. They also, when they get them there, they really prioritize saving the white girl, and then the black kid is kind of the afterthought. They make sure they save Kate, have a little chit-chat with her once she wakes up from the magic hot chocolate, and then they go over and save the black kid. There's also another scene where Mrs. Claus runs to stand behind the black kid when shit's going down. Instead of in front of to protect the kids, she stands behind. And I'm sure it's just the way the scenes were blocked, but it's just kind of weird. It was kind of weird, and I noticed. Kate is famous in the North Pole, obviously after the events of the first one, which is a weird random thing. They get a tour of Santa's village, which is fun. The veil, as they call it, the protection system that they use, the Northern Lights and a sliver from the Star of David or something. Not Star of David. Bethlehem. Star of Bethlehem. Which I'm not a fan of that aspect of it either. But them working together creates Northern Light kind of defense system that will kill anybody that tries to get into the North Pole, I guess. It's not clear what happens when you get zapped by the Aurora Borealis shafts of light that come down to shoot you, that Santa himself has to dodge and maneuver around every time he gets back into the North Pole. He has to dodge and maneuver this defense system that he has set up to protect him from a snowcat, an elf that was banished once. Like, doesn't really seem to have a lot of enemies, but definitely prepared for an invasion. Kate really pushing to try and live at the North Pole, which I thought this movie was going to like flash forward and then like she actually gets a job, or maybe, chapter 3, part 3, if they ever do one, which I don't think they could, but I could see her working, like being the only other human that works at the North Pole, and then her brother and mom and like their family, Bob and the other kid, they all go and visit. And then that's where the new adventure happens. Maybe that would be okay. Tyrese, make it blend it in with like Fast and the Furious. Maybe that would be kind of fun. You have Kurt Russell and Tyrese going on some kind of crazy mission together to save Christmas. That would probably be a lot of fun. Let's take a short break from this episode. Hey, loyal listeners of The Ray Taylor Show. It's one thing to tune in and engage with the content I passionately create for you, but what if I told you there's a way to wear your fandom? Introducing our exclusive line of merchandise inspired directly by the vibes and visuals of this very podcast. From stylish t-shirts that'll make you stand out in a crowd, to our eco-friendly, biodegradable phone cases adorned with artwork inspired by the show. You can now carry a piece of The Ray Taylor Show wherever you go. Whether you're looking to make a fashion statement, protect your phone with some flair, or simply want to show off your love of the show, our merchandise has got you covered. Ready to rock our gear? Head on over to inspireddisorder.com and get yours today. Wear the show, be the vibe. Now let's get back to that very show. There's this magic power that the evil elf, the banished elf, uses to turn elves evil. And you see, and he steals the star. But this is like, that's the moment where it's like, oh, gremlins. They all kind of look like Mogwai. And then he shoots in these cannons that dispense the fake snow, or the real snow, but these snow dispensers, cannons he uses to dispense this magic powder that turns the elves into evil gremlins, basically. And then you have basically what is Gremlins, the first Gremlins movie, taking place on the North Pole. And of course, this is, that was written and directed by Chris Columbus. So it's clear that, like, that's what he brought to the table. It's like, I got a great idea. Those elves look a lot like Mogwai. And I don't know if you've seen one of my good movies from the 80s, but we could do that at the North Pole, and that could be a lot of fun, man. Which is kind of fun, and would have been fun if we didn't have all the other stuff going on. And it's like halfway through this movie, still no real action or adventure. Just kind of a lot of setup. Which, again, could have just been the evil elf story and not even bothered with it. Just trim the fat of this movie. You have Jack. So Kate goes on a mission with Santa to go get another sliver of the Bethlehem star that gets stolen by the bad guy. And as he gets away, he uses a device that makes them go back in time. Specifically Boston in 1990. For some reason, that's where Evil Elf wanted to send him. Which just happens to be where her dad is at in some holding cell for some reason. So she's on another mission with Santa, and Jack is back with Mrs. Claus, and Mrs. Claus is like, hey, kid, you need to go on your own adventure by yourself. And I'm going to give you a couple cookies, one of which is an explosive, the other of which is a placebo. And you're going to have to scale a mountain to get a root, but you're going to do that on your own. You're not going to take a reindeer with you that can maybe fly or at least run on the ground to help you get there faster. You're going to have to just do it on your own, which is kind of ridiculous. In this movie, Santa's able to do some magic without his hat, which in the first movie, he could only do magic if he has his hat. So they kind of changed that in a way. All he has to do is, like, flick his nose in this one. The scene where they get stuck in 1990, kind of fun at the airport. She goes to buy batteries, but of course she's got future money, so it looks different than what money looked like in the 90s. So the cashier doesn't believe her, and she starts to walk away holding the batteries. The airport police stop her and take her into custody, not because she's shoplifting, but because she doesn't have an adult around, which I don't think they would have cared that much in the 90s. She should have been... She still has the batteries, by the way. She successfully, despite the police detaining her, she still has the batteries that she stole from the gift shop. So she ends up going to this holding cell where, of course, she runs into another kid her age, which just happens to be her dad. And, of course, to get the Christmas spirit up, Santa sings a whole musical number, which is a lot of fun. Kind of a gospel Christmas song with saxophone, kind of similar in some ways to the first movie. Whole dance number where everybody in the airport is dancing. Nice little heart-to-heart with her and her dad, which is fine. Jack successfully gets this root that is the only thing that can cure the elves' evil potion thing. And now that he's got the root, now he's got to do another mission on his own. Mrs. Claus is like, okay, now you got to get, and I think he's like volunteering, but he's like, now you got to take this potion that I made from this root, and you got to go up to our cannons that shoot the snow, because we can't have real snow, because we have to have this massive defense system for some reason. I mean, it also powers the North Pole, but also is a defense system. A ridiculous defense system that Santa himself needs to avoid every time he returns to the North Pole. You have to take this potion up to those cannons, and you have to get through all of the crazy gremlin-like elves. And what am I going to give you? A little Nerf bow and arrow. Nerf crossbow. It's like, okay. The whole end battle is kind of a mess. Despite how much less I like this movie, when everything is said and done and she gets back to, when her and Kate and Jack get back to Mexico, where it's just always windy, by the way, and they go out and sing the dad's Christmas song on the beach, I got choked up. Like, it's similar to the first movie. The ends of these movies, they hit me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because I'm going through stuff this time of year. This time of year is kind of tough for me in general. Or whatever. They know the magic, how to end a Christmas movie. Got me all choked up. But yeah, didn't think I liked this as much. I think this could have been a great anthology-style franchise centered around Mr. and Mrs. Claus, right? Like I said, like the Despicable Me, each movie different, a new story about Christmas, and some wild things Santa had to deal with on Christmas because, and in that they could have referenced so many Christmas movies. Imagine one of these movies that like references this time Santa went to France and saw that there was another Santa trying to kill a kid, and kind of seeing what he did. And I'm talking about Dial Code Santa, which is an obscure French movie that is very similar to Home Alone, or even Home Alone, another Chris Columbus movie. You have Santa delivering gifts, and he sees this kid defending his home, and you see like how Santa helped Macaulay Culkin's character out, helping him in these little things. Maybe going to the neighbor and going like, hey, you should check out what's going on next door. You know, him going to whatever town it is in Gremlins and seeing how he helped figure things out and help the gremlin attack end. You know, you could have had these fun adventures. You could have had one of them being an origin story. How did Santa, being the prophesized one, the toy maker, flesh the whole beginning of the North Pole thing out? Could have been a lot of fun. Could have had a big franchise. Like, what's Kurt Russell gonna do now? What kind of crazy story are we gonna get? Oh, this one's in the 80s. Oh, because he's been around forever, you could do period pieces of Kurt Russell saving Christmas throughout history. And then do spin-off movies with the little elves. You know. Whatever. What am I thinking? It's a Christmas movie. Like, this movie could have just been about the Belsnickel, the evil elf, right? Or just make it about the origins of the North Pole, like I said. I don't know. Regardless, I wasn't much of a fan. Not as much as I was of the first film, anyway. Still not a horrible Christmas movie. I was just hoping for more, a fun action scene. There was no real fun action scenes. I don't know. It was just they were trying to do too much. But I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Ray Taylor Show, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the Christmas Chronicles Part 2. Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for more movie and TV show reviews. And join the conversation by leaving a comment or rating on your favorite podcast platform or over on youtube.com/inspireddisorder. Until next time, ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Subscribe to The Ray Taylor Show on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Purchase Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.